like clock. I can't stop. Fuck around, make my 40 pop.
Alright guys, Boruto episode 249. This episode right here was definitely a decent episode. One of the things that I definitely loved about this episode was that it incorporated a very important storyline for Boruto, and of course one of the storylines that we already seen in Naruto before, and it's essentially Boruto learning about the cycle of hatred. This right here, my personal opinion, is going to stick with Boruto for probably the rest of his life, similar to how it stuck with Naruto for essentially the rest of his life. The way they did it was by making Funamushi a sympathetic figure. The first thing that they essentially did was essentially free Iwabe and Denki, and I'll talk about that a little bit later in this episode. But Iwabe and Denki still being alive wasn't necessarily enough. Iwabe and Denki had to tell stories about why they believe that they were actually not killed, and the reason why they weren't actually killed is because they were actually gathering food for the children of the village. This right here made it seem that Funamushi actually had a conscience. This right here is the first step of Boruto actually seeing Funamushi as an actual person and not just a flat-out enemy, as a lot of ninjas are technically supposed to do. And of course, this right here, in my personal opinion, wasn't necessarily good enough to have Boruto actually view Funamushi as a sympathetic figure. They included Funamushi's actual son. This right here really messed Boruto up. Him essentially seeing a very young kid trying to actually exact revenge for Funamushi essentially made him understand, like, this right here is essentially just going to breed more hatred, and what Boruto did originally was just avenging one of his friends, Kagura, and in turn he of course caused another person harm, and of course caused another person distress, and made another person want to again exact revenge on behalf of Funamushi by killing Boruto. So now Boruto's starting to see this right here is just the cycle of hatred, something that Naruto essentially vowed to end for a very long time. I'm not gonna lie, when Boruto gets home from this mission and goes back to Naruto and explains to him what happened, they're probably gonna have one of the best talks of all time. Naruto speaking to Boruto is probably gonna connect so much dots. Boruto right now, he can't necessarily eloquently talk about why he doesn't necessarily want to fight the other clan, even though he did actually bring up some good points. Naruto is gonna essentially bring it full circle for Boruto, because Naruto's been talking about this for his entire life, and of course one of the biggest reasons why he did actually become Hokage. Of course there's a lot of other things, but one of the biggest reasons. The downside, however, is that I don't necessarily think that this situation in particular applies to the quote-unquote cycle of hatred, because it is an actual war. The reason why I say that is because hypothetically, if they just don't fight the Funato clan at all, the Funato clan is still going to attack the Hidden Mist village, so they have to actually defend the Hidden Mist village. This was never really like an offensive war for the Hidden Mist village and Boruto and the rest of them. This was really just a defensive war and just a reactionary war because the Funato clan was actually attacking the Hidden Mist village. But however, I think that Boruto definitely did have a breakthrough in this particular episode. The goal of the war isn't necessarily to exact revenge on other people because they killed some people on your side. The goal of the war, especially for the Hidden Mist village, is to end the war. So even right now, Metal is essentially talking about how he wants to exact revenge for Hibichigo and things such as that. Boruto's essentially gonna have to tell him, like, yo, that's not the way to go, even though he understands that it might hurt that Hibichigo is gone, even though it might hurt that Kagura is gone. We can't necessarily just carry on this war for petty, selfish reasons. And I personally do believe this right here is definitely going to be a very good storyline for the entirety of this arc. Now, Iwabe and Denki were still alive. Now, one of the things I've definitely been critical of the Boruto anime for is not necessarily killing the good guys, quote unquote, even though that doesn't necessarily apply in this specific arc. So I'm going to give them a bit of leeway for Iwabe and Denki still being alive, especially since Iwabe and Denki still being alive contributed to a very big storyline in the actual arc. Boruto essentially now seeing Funamushi as more of a sympathetic figure. Hypothetically, if Funamushi did actually kill Iwabe and Denki, Boruto wouldn't necessarily be seeing the cycle of hatred this clearly as he does right now. And I personally do believe this right here was an impeccable touch. One of the things I definitely did wish, though, I wish they had a better way of actually portraying it. Like, I don't necessarily like Iwabe and Denki just being forgotten by the Funato clan and them just being completely left alive. I don't know. I want to see Iwabe and Denki have to go 2v like 5 or something like that. Actually have to fight for their life or something like that. And then Funamushi comes in and be like, nah, chill out, let these guys live. Something like that. I don't know. I just wish it was a bit more entertaining. But for the purpose of the episode, for the purpose of this arc, I definitely do not have a problem with how they did it. Another big thing is the fact that Boruto is now going to be prime suspect #1 because of the fact that he's essentially said to be the one to kill Funamushi, even though technically it wasn't necessarily Boruto, and also because he was said to play a part in actually injuring Siren. Boruto is now going to be prime suspect number 1. And of course, Boruto has to understand that one of the things that is going to be very difficult for Boruto to do right now is actually preach peace when he himself actually did contribute to 2 major people being significantly injured or actually dying in the actual war. So it's going to be very, very difficult for, let's say, Boruto to approach a character like Oromi, the leader of the Funato clan, and actually try to get a truce. Like, that right there is going to be a very difficult thing to ask, especially for a character who is actually related to the 2 people that Boruto played a part in actually killing and injuring. Now, not only that, Boruto in this episode also found out the relation between Ikada and Sirin. This right here completely messed Boruto up. Boruto is now understand that it might be a certain situation where Ikada might essentially fall into the same cycle of hatred. Even though they built a very good relationship, it's still going to be a very difficult thing for Ikada to actually truly forgive Boruto, because even as of right now, Ikada is literally by Sirin's side trying to nurse her back to health, which is probably going to be a very difficult thing to do. Now, one of the questions I did actually have, why in the world did they bring up Ikada? Like, out of all the characters, like, he could have said, hey, the person that you injured, Sirin, is the boss's daughter, Oromi. That would have been a much more significant thing to bring up to Boruto if they didn't necessarily know that Boruto and Ikada actually did have a relationship. And if they do know that Boruto and Ikada has a relationship, it's going to now put Ikada in a very sticky situation, mainly because it might seem that Ikada is kind of playing both sides, even though it kind of already did, mainly because he doesn't necessarily want to join the battle. It's just going to put a lot more pressure on Ikada, hypothetically, if they do know that he's friends with the person who actually did kill Funamushi and did injure Sirin. But let me know what you guys think about this episode. I thought it was a very, very good episode, decent one. Of course, introduced the cycle of hatred to Boruto. But it's been your boy, BarB, and we out.
It's a knife.